Filipinos are literally everywhere. And so if there were a Filipino Pope, we would begin to notice just what type of leaven Filipino Catholics are all across the globe. When you're looking at the places in, for example, Scandinavia that are growing in terms of the number of Catholics, a little part of that are the conversions of those who come from those countries, but the vast growth is coming because Filipinos have arrived and are really doing so many of the support industries there. And as a result, in all these places, there's a need for English masses in order to be able to serve the burgeoning still Filipino Catholic community. And so that would be a tremendous honor to this community, which is one of the most important in the church in 2020.
Let's continue on our path of the analysis of our wonderful electors who could potentially be the ones that get announced after we see smoke at some point over the next couple of days. God willing, not too many days. We'll be waiting in anticipation, and I know the Cardinals are going to want to go home too.
We're watching the chimney now.
That's exactly right. Well, one cardinal that really made a big debut in the United States with the National Eucharistic Congress is Cardinal Tagle, who was sent over as the envoy to represent the Holy Father and bring us into this moment of Eucharistic love. 60,000 people on their knees. You could hear a pin drop in that moment last summer. It was just incredible, and I do credit that and that move from the bishops for the revival that we're seeing around the country, and I would argue around the world. All of these young communities, especially this Easter, we saw reporting out of France and out of different countries in Europe and also in Africa, people coming into the church, being confirmed, being baptized in Belgium after the Holy Father's visit. It was just incredible to see. The pictures just speak for themselves. So Cardinal Tagle, he's known as someone who smiles a lot. He's kind of gone viral on social media. And Hannah, I don't know what you can tell us about what you've seen with the comments online and how young people react to him.
Well, he was really popular during the Synod on Youth. I mean, he kind of was, I guess, just popular among the young people that were taking part in the Synod on youth and young people. And I know there was sort of a dance party at one point and maybe a dance video, if I recall correctly. So I just know my very first impressions of him, I ran into him by chance once in Rome when he had just arrived, and he was extremely cordial and kind. So he's definitely a popular person.
Yes, and he's not American, but he is American educated, right, Matthew?
Yes, he is. His doctorate in theology, sacred theology, is from the Catholic University of America. His formation academically, and this is sort of inside baseball, but it does matter where he's concerned.
Everything matters at this point.
He's very much somebody schooled in what is called the Bologna School of interpreting the Second Vatican Council, and we can talk more about that. Basically, it is a school of thought that approaches the Second Vatican Council as more of a rupture from the past than continuity. So it's just one little facet to consider as we look at how he might interpret and then implement his vision for the Second Vatican Council, which for us as a church is still a lived experience, and the process of implementation is going to be crucial. He has long pastoral experience, having served in the Philippines as the Archbishop in particular of Manila, and then was brought here to become prefect for the dicastery now for evangelization. He ran into some difficulties, obviously, with the way the Caritas Internationalis unfolded because of some of the financial problems that it had. And then he found himself somewhat demoted, you might say, by Pope Francis to become pro-prefect for the dicastery for evangelization. But that wasn't his fault. Pope Francis, in his reorganization of the Roman Curia under the important document Predicate Evangelium, which reformed the whole of the Roman Curia, essentially Francis made himself prefect of the dicastery, which is his right. So from that standpoint, it's been a rough couple of years for Cardinal Tagle, and in some ways the hits just keep coming. His name really did surface almost immediately after Pope Francis's passing, but we haven't heard that much about him for about the last 10 days or so.
Hannah, what have you heard?
Well, regarding the Caritas situation, by all means, when he was demoted, he had an extremely humble and gracious response because it wasn't a great moment for him. And at the beginning, there wasn't a lot of information either for us journalists about what was going on internally there. But he really took it for the team there.
He did, yes.
And I think that's something that we have tried to look for. We talked about the situation in Canada and how the Holy Father came and really represented that mercy and love that is necessary. So taking one for the team is not necessarily a bad thing when you're looking for someone who can be a representative and a diplomat. He seems to check a couple of these boxes.
Cardinal Tagle is one of the best preachers in the Catholic Church. He's had the reputation of being that good since at least 2005. He's got likewise the reputation of being a very poor administrator at Caritas Internationalis and in Manila, of not being particularly forthright, especially in prophetically calling the government of Duterte, which was sending out hit squads on people, that they needed to turn to other voices in order to condemn that. He did defend the church's teachings when it came to some of the teachings on sexuality, when the Filipino government was trying to push things contrary to human good. I have always enjoyed very much my time with Cardinal Tagle. The first time I met him, he pulled one of the greatest practical jokes I've ever suffered. And I'll just never forget him for that. He's a guy who is able to do those types of things. Sometimes you say that you just want to be around somebody who's infectiously joyful. That is Cardinal Tagle. If he were the face of the Catholic Church, the face would have a big smile. Sometimes he's criticized because when he preaches, he gets emotional and he often weeps. I don't really think that that's a problem when someone's preaching. It would be a problem if he were meeting against dictators that he's crying in their midst. Unfortunately, yesterday, sometimes when you're a front runner, various people who don't want you to win put out hit pieces on you. And in the Italian press, there was a hit piece on Cardinal Tagle yesterday accusing him through avatars or pseudonyms of gambling in Macau with 5 anonymous sources. I think we need to be ready for that type of potential disinformation. I wouldn't give much weight there at the 11th hour, but it does show that certain people were concerned that Tagle would be elected and didn't want that eventuality. We have to be as wise as serpents in the way that we digest that type of information, waiting for the other side, just out of justice.
In much the same way that the rumor began about some health scare for Cardinal Parolin.
That's right.
Yeah, last week, that the Holy See press office simply absolutely just rejected out of hand. I mentioned Cardinal Parolin also because we talked about him as somebody who has a global profile. Well, in his role as prefect and then pro-prefect for evangelization, Cardinal Tagle is somebody who is extremely well known in the developing parts of the church, the younger parts of the church. So that relationship with all of those cardinals from places like Africa and Asia, he's obviously extremely already well known in Asia. Those could redound to his benefit when it comes to trying to decide who they would vote for in a conclave.
What do you see as his experience of applying synodality? That's something that came up. There were quite a few conversations around that in the general congregation, and it's a place where I haven't really been able to put my finger on.
He has a reputation of very much supporting Pope Francis's general line on synodality. He's never given a critical remark of that. Personally, he's a listener. He always wanted to involve, especially the poor, in the decisions that were being made when he was first a bishop in his native Imus in the Philippines. So I think if somebody were looking for a cardinal who would continue the synodal developments under the pontificate of Pope Francis, Cardinal Tagle would be somebody who would step on the gas pedal rather than slam the brakes.
Now, Matthew, I think this is something that we've discussed in the past when we're thinking about the number of faithful around the world. It was quite remarkable to have the first ever Latin American Pope, a Pope that represented a block of faithful that is first, second, when you put them together in the world of the number of Catholics.
Right.
When you look at Asia and the Asian bloc, the number of faithful in the Philippines, what would that do in terms of bringing a light to a place where the faith is growing rather than falling apart?
Yeah, it would have an enormous impact on the global church. If we thought that Pope Francis is a Latin American, but he was a Latin American from Argentina, he had close ties to Italy, this would be a pretty radical departure in papal history, certainly modern papal history. So I think it would also be a recognition of the remarkable growth of the church across Asia. And this is one of the fastest growing parts of the church in much the same way that Africa is. But Asia also brings with it such a diversity of experiences for the church. We have the persecutions in China. We have trying to deal with the multicultural realities of places like Malaysia, Indonesia, and Singapore. And then we have the Philippines, which is 90% Catholic. It has 98 million Catholics, I think, by our analysis. For him to come from that environment to become the Holy Father, I think would have long ramifications for the continued growth of the church in that part of the world.
And a place where the church is persecuted in some ways and has challenges that I think would resonate with other places in the world that others would categorize as developing, right?
Yes. Yeah, I'd want to add to what Matthew was saying, that the Filipinos are the new Irish. The Filipinos are everywhere. It's the third most populous Catholic country, but because especially of the Filipino prowess in fishing, they're all over the world in that industry. And in the service industries, in the nursing profession, Filipinos are literally everywhere. And so if there were a Filipino Pope, we would begin to notice just what type of leaven Filipino Catholics are all across the globe. When you're looking at the places in, for example, Scandinavia, that are growing in terms of the number of Catholics, a little part of that are the conversions of those who come from those countries, but the vast growth is coming because Filipinos have arrived and are really doing so many of the support industries there. And as a result, in all these places, there's a need for English masses in order to be able to serve the burgeoning, still, Filipino Catholic community. And so that would be a tremendous honor to this community, which is one of the most important in the church in 2025.
I want to take this opportunity just to say hello to our family watching around the world, listening on radio, because I know so many of our viewers come from the church in the Philippines. And so just a very warm hello to all of you. So grateful that you're with us, that you pray with us, and that in this moment we are going to receive the news of the successor to the seat of Peter together as one. So thank you for being so faithful to us and for sharing this beautiful heart that I know Mother Angelica, I think her heart would explain, but it's certainly translated for those who were in the audience that day.
That's what everybody said. As somebody who was present there when he made the connection between the Eucharist and mission, that Jesus in the Eucharist is literally giving of himself to us, trying to transform us from the inside so that we will make the same self-gift to others. That's what we heard in the homily on Sunday from Dominique Mamberti about the gift of self. Cardinal Tagle is someone who not only preaches that way, but tries to live that way, that from the Eucharist, he wants to go on out. The Eucharist is intentionally, he preached, missionary, that gets us to say in our own body language, this is my body, this is my blood, these are my calloused hands, this is my sweat, these are even my tears, offered out of love for you.
Well, the body of Christ coming together in St. Peter's, watching this chimney that is, again, the most famous chimney in the world, is represented in the individuals coming here who want to watch and listen and pray together. Colum, let's go back to you and continue this conversation with those out in the square.